Okay, so in this lesson we're going to be dealing with matrices and some basic operations. So matrices, that's the plural form of the word matrix, and a matrix is just a grid of numbers. So notice how each element in this matrix corresponds to each element over here. So A is equal to 1, B is equal to 4, C is equal to -3, and D is equal to 0. This is what we call a 2 by 2 matrix. So these are 2 rows by 2 columns. See, we can have 2 rows and 2 columns, giving us that 2 by 2. When we add or subtract matrices, we add the corresponding parts. So here, 2 plus 1, 7 plus 4, -3 plus -3, and then 0 plus 0. Once I have these paired up, I can add them. So 2 plus 1 is 3, 7 plus 4 is 11, -3 plus -3 is -6, and 0 plus 0 is 0. And that is our sum of those two matrices. When we are subtracting, it's the same procedure, except we are subtracting. So just watch out for a negative sign that distributes in. So all these little plus signs would just be a minus sign. So don't make it more complicated than that. Scalar multiplication is when we take some constant, so this 5 right here is what we call a scalar, and we distribute it in. Before, when we had transformations of graphs, we scaled them. So like 2x squared, that stretched the graph of x squared by a factor of 2. So we're going to do the same thing here. So we're going to multiply each term inside the matrix by this scalar. So 5 times -1 is -5, 5 times 0 is 0, 5 times 4 is 20, and 5 times 9 is 45. That's it. It's that simple. Now with multiplying matrices, we have to be careful because we can only multiply two matrices together when the columns in the first match the rows in the second. What does that mean? Well, if I look here, this is a 2 by 3 matrix. This second matrix is a 3 by 2 matrix. So if I look at the columns in the first and the rows in the second, they are the same value. So that means I can multiply them. Now if this were a 1 by 4 times a 3 by 2, I couldn't because these values wouldn't be matching. Also looking ahead, we can see that these two outside numbers are the same. These two outside numbers are going to be the dimensions of the new matrix. So when I multiply, I'm going to multiply this first row by each column until I don't have any more columns. So here I multiply this first row by this first column, and then I'm going to sum all the values together. That's going to be the next step. But first off, I'm just going to multiply each corresponding part. So I have 1 times 2. So 1 times 2 plus -5 times 0 plus 0 times 9. Notice I have the first times the first, the second times the second, the third times the third, and I add those pieces together. Now continuing on in that first row, I'm going to multiply by the second column. So I get 1 times 5 plus -5 times -1 plus 0 times 7. So now I've multiplied, or I've used this first row 2 times. So I move on to the second row, and I multiply that by the first column. So I get 2 times 2 plus 4 times 0 plus -3 times 9. I've used up the first column, so I move on to the second column. So I do 2 times 5 plus 4 times negative 1 plus negative 3 times 7. One thing to take note of is, see how this first row is 1, negative 5, 0? You should have that for all your elements in your first row. The second row is 2, 4, negative 3. I should have that for all elements there. Similarly, the columns go 2, 0, 9 and 5, negative 1, 7. So now all I have to do is combine these and add these together. And I'm actually going to get 2. Over here, 5 plus 5 is 10. So 2, 10. Over here, I'm going to get 4 plus a negative 27 is a negative 23. And then finally, a negative 15. So that is how we multiply these two matrices together. If we look, whoops, this is the same one. If we look over here, these two, we can see this is a 2 by 2 matrix times a 2 by 2, which means we can multiply them together. This is a 2 by 3 times a 3 by 2, just like we just had. So because these values in the middle are the same, we can multiply. So here I do the first row times the first column to get 0 times 0 plus 3 times negative 1. And then the first row times the second column is 0 times negative 1 plus 3 times 2. The second row times the first column is negative 5 times 0 plus 2 times negative 1. And then that second column times the second row times the second column is negative 5 times negative 1 plus 2 times 2. So we add these together, so we get negative 3, 6, negative 2, and finally 5 plus 4 is 9. Those are the answers there. And then moving on to number 2 here, we are going to do the first row, so negative 3 times the first column times 4 plus 6 times 0 plus 6 times 5. I'm going to run out of room here. Negative 3 times 3 plus 6 times negative 6 plus 6 times negative 2. And then, so that's all the first row. And then the second row is going to be negative 3 times 4 plus 0 times 0 plus 0 times 5. And then followed by a negative 3 times 3 plus 0 times negative 6 plus 0 times a negative 2. So adding all these together, I'm going to get a negative 12 plus 30, which is going to be a positive 18. And then this is going to be, oh boy, so that's a negative 9 plus a negative 36 plus a negative 12. That's going to be negative 57. And then down here, this is just a negative 12 and a negative 9. So sometimes this seems a little bit more tedious than anything else, but as long as you write out your steps, as long as you show your process, you can't go wrong. So get some more practice in and watch out to make sure that the columns and the rows match so we can multiply.